Hello, everyone. A warm welcome on this wintry Friday afternoon. I'm glad that you could all join us for this AQuA event. AQuA stands for All Questions Answered. And we have an illustrious panel today. Reina, Bischoff, Wolfram, Burgard, and Francesco Pharaoh, who seems to be having a technical problem, but is surely going to join us soon. The format is a rather unique one. For those of you who have not been in an AQuA event before, the idea is that it's entirely driven by the questions that you, the participants out there, might have surrounding the question of humanoid robots. And of course, this topic is a broad and interesting one, so we're not going to interpret this all too narrowly. I'm Holger, host, chair of the board of directors and co-founder of the Confederation of Laboratories for AI Research in Europe. And we're very, very happy to present this event together with our partners at euRobotics. So I'm briefly going to pass the stage to Reina Bischoff from euRobotics to greet you as well. And then to Wolfram so he can introduce himself. Francesco may join us in a moment and he will introduce himself when he does. Please, Reina.
Yes, thank you, Holger. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Reina Bischoff. I'm joining this panel in my capacity as a Vice President Industry, euRobotics. euRobotics is a European Robotics Association with about 250 members. And I'm also very pleased to have this collaboration with Clara ongoing. And this is now the first time I'm able to join here in a live call where both communities are present. So I'm looking forward to the panel discussion. Hand over to you, Wolfram.
Yes, thank you also for having me here. I'm Wolfram Burgard, a professor for robotics and artificial intelligence at the brand new University of Technology in Nuremberg. I've been working in robot navigation and perception and control over many years, and I hope that I can at least answer some of the questions that will come up in this session.
Excellent. Welcome to all of you, and welcome also to all of our listeners and viewers out there. This is being streamed to YouTube as well, so we don't exactly know how many people are out there. And of course, there's also a recording that will be made available later to those who are interested in the fascinating questions surrounding the development and use of humanoid robots. So this is where we go into the question answering mode. So let's see what we're getting in terms of questions from our audience here. By the way, while we're waiting for questions to come in, I should thank Alexa Kodde, who is joining us here from the Clara headquarters and is doing all the logistics and technical work behind the scenes, and who's also making sure that we don't miss any questions that have been asked. So with that said, let's launch into the first question. Here is one that I'm just seeing. How close are we to being able to build humanoid robots that match our bodies and our minds? So human bodies and minds in all relevant aspects. And that would include humanoid robots playing things like football and musical instruments and doing all sorts of things that currently only people can do. So I'm wondering, Reina or Wolfram, who would like to say something about that?
Reina, you go ahead. You ever? It's probably not listening right now. Huh? But then if Reina is unable to speak right now, then I'm going to answer that.
I have some audio problems here, actually.
Yeah.
Now we can hear you again, Reina.
Yes, but fine. I have some audio problems, some very double speech. I know, but several seconds apart. I don't know if this is annoying to any one of you.
Nope.
Okay.
Here.
Yes. So I think that we are so far away from developing humanoids.
I agree.
So it seems to me also to be the case, but maybe it's more interesting to ask ourselves, how far are we away, right? I mean, I heard Elon Musk, a few weeks ago make this big announcement that now they're developing humanoid robots, right? I'm sure you've seen that too, many of you out there as well. And he seems to believe that within a few years, maybe as in 3 or 4 or 5, one could be essentially there. Is that something that you guys believe in? Because I'm a little bit skeptical there.
Reina?
Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Now my problem is solved. So I could not listen for the past 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So then I will respond to this. I mean, building a robot is a difficult problem, and building a robot that does a useful task and that is versatile enough to actually work in our homes and fulfill that what we call in robotics everyday tasks for us is actually something that we are very, very far away from. So what we are having right now is robots that perform very specific tasks, right? Like mowing our lawns, vacuuming our rooms, but doing other things like actually autonomously putting items into a dishwasher is something that we are really very far away from. And I think that from first of all, the perception and control part and the understanding part, this is something that requires a lot of research. And then on top of this, and this is potentially something that Reina can also talk a little bit more about from the hardware point of view, this is also an issue to actually build systems that are reliable enough to operate over longer periods of time, that don't break, that can fall potentially, that can collide with things without breaking, that can handle tiny little objects, and all these kind of things, something that we are very, very far away from my perspective. But and so I find this 4-year interval or time range that Elon Musk mentioned a little bit on the too optimistic side for humanoid robots in a mass production in homes, for example.
Wolfram, I totally agree. Maybe I would like to ask another question first. Do we need humanoids? And maybe answering this question. So I would definitely agree, yes, we need them as a general purpose robot or representative of us in dangerous places like space. There might be also other things that might be reasonable on Earth where we might need humanoids. But for using them at homes, or let's say even at shop floor level, I think there's no economic path right now to do that. So either it's not reliable enough because you have so many sensors and actuators involved, so you will never get the reliability, or it's not flexible yet enough. And even we are having problems to make a single robot arm or even a mobile manipulator, a robot arm on a mobile platform, flexible enough so that it can be useful and used in an economic sense. I mean, there's of course always research interest in these things, and we also would like to have a humanoid around us, probably because we are curious beings. But from an economic point of view, it does not make sense in, let's say, in standard manufacturing or household tasks to have this general purpose robot.
That's really interesting. Meanwhile, Francesco Pharaoh has actually joined us. Welcome, Francesco. We are live on air here. No worries, it's great to have you here. If you could very briefly introduce yourself, and I think you've been listening for the last little bit what we've been discussing, so maybe you can contribute to that as well. But maybe first a very brief introduction.
Yes. Firstly, sorry for the delay. I had some connection problems. I'm Francesco Pharaoh, the CEO of Robotics, a Spanish company that is specialized on service robotics. Okay, and we also produce some humanoids and also legged robots. And we have several line, and I'm here also to not only agree on this panel list, but also try to make some other point of view. Okay.
More than welcome.
Great. So it's wonderful to have all of you there. And Francesco, I'm really happy that you could resolve these technical issues. I'm just seeing a question coming in here. And maybe this is one that we should answer before going more deeply into how desirable or how feasible humanoid robots are. And this is a very basic question. What is a humanoid robot? So Francesco, maybe you can explain to our audience what a humanoid robot is.
I will try to don't enter in the same error of the definition of robots. If I remember, it was a bunch of engineers that just discussed from philosophical point of view more than 20 years about definition. And if nowadays you read this definition, probably is is the things. I will just simplify it, saying that it's something that have a human similar things. So as not to be absolutely legged robot, but as to be aesthetic, at least aesthetically point of view, as to be humanoid. So as to be like a human. Okay, so this is my point of view.
So I'm wondering whether Wolfram or Reina would like to add anything to that, or do you guys think that this is the definition of it?
It definitely makes sense from my point of view, because if you have a wheeled robot, you have also more space and capacity for the battery. So just from a practical point of view, there's huge advantages, and you can have let's say a low base with a low center of gravity, which also helps you to have an upper body where you can have 1 or 2 arms attached to it. So it makes your life a lot easier when we can include humanoids being wheeled humanoids.
Completely agree with this. These are like the upper torso to, like, if this looks like a human, then I'm fine with calling the robot a humanoid.
So, but that means that all three of you believe that a humanoid robot should have, 2-fingered hands and arms, and be able to, accomplish tasks that require essentially the dexterity of a human, right?
I would not say the dexterity of a human, because the 5-fingered hands, this is something that is also not available, and probably, again, from an economic point of view, not desirable. If you go for 2-fingered hands, like you just said, I think that's okay. Or maybe 3-fingered hands, that you have a larger variety of objects that you're able to grasp or to manipulate. But we should not try to replicate the human as such, at least as we are now in the state of technology where this would be really, really too costly to roll out in numbers.
So that then means you would go for it, Wolfram.
The idea is that you basically build a robot that can manipulate the world that has been created for humans, by humans, in fact. But so, for example, if you think about a doorknob, right, that has been optimized for a human hand. Every handle has been created in a way that humans can easily manipulate these things. So, and this is the underlying hypothesis or one of the underlying hypotheses of humanoid robot research. Can we build mechanical systems that can deal with all these affordances that have been made for humans? And that doesn't necessarily need to be 5-fingered hands, right? But it can also be 3-fingered hands, and so on and so forth. Right? So from an application point of view, right? So I mean, our hands are now so general because all the objects are also made for our hands, and this is something that we need to take into account. I mean, we could argue that in a robotic world with other robots, we build objects that are good for robots, right? That could be the alternative, but yeah, but maybe it is more effective to build the objects in a way that we can still humans can do the stuff, but that would require then robots that are more human-like, and maybe, but we don't know.
If I can add something, I think that I will change the point of view. So in my opinion, we don't have to try to describe robots, humans in general, with 3-finger, 4-finger, 5-finger, 8-finger, whatever. The idea is that we need to have something. So a robot that is humanoids. Why humanoids? Because in my opinion, I don't foresee myself chatting or collaborating with a washing machine, okay, with a cube. So in order to make better conversation, also the acceptability, humanoid is demonstrated that is one of the best form. And then from the other side, about the manipulation that you mentioned, in my opinion, the important thing is that the robot has to be able to use the same tools that we built for us. So this is the point of view that we have to take into account. So if the robot will have wheels, will have 1, 2, or 3 arms or whatever, has to be able to manipulate the same object that we already built for us. And so this is, in my opinion, the right point of view. So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I don't think that for robotics, especially for service robotics and humanoids robotics, we will make the same that we did for the cars, for example. So reinvent all our city and making, the lane just for car, traffic lights, whatever. In my opinion, we will not do this. But robotics has to try to use and invent something, a humanoid that could use the same tools that we have in our house.
So that's interesting, because to me, that means what you're really saying, if I understand it correctly, is that a humanoid robot is a robot that's made to work well in a world full of objects and environments made for humans, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to look so much like a human, although Francesco, you just made the point that maybe it should look somewhat human-like in order to be more relatable, right? Is that correct?
Yes, it's correct.
And the first part of that statement that I just made then would kind of include that it would mean that maybe Elon Musk is on a strange path, right? Because as far as I remember, his Tesla bot is legged, has 5-fingered hands, and is actually really to approximate the anatomy of the human body, right? And I guess what I hear you guys saying is that in order to work well in a world made for humans and full of objects made to be handled by humans, one doesn't have to necessarily look exactly like a human in order to function, right? And I think Elon is taking this somehow in a different space where he says, we want to make a robot that looks as close to a human as possible, no?
Completely right. So I think that this approach that Elon is restarting is not new. We already seen this kind of sentences several years ago with other big company. And in my opinion, we wish the best to him and to their company in order to build this kind of humanoids. But we think that the reality are in probably in a constant robust work that we are doing in the community in order to have this kind of platform functionally soon. So this is my point of view.
Mm-hmm. Reina, Wolfram, do you see this differently? Either of you?
No, I completely agree with this. I mean, I know where the path of that discussion is going, and I was just already preparing for the next question. That will come up.
I'm not sure. We'll see.
I mean, so maybe just one small addition what I said initially. I think that general purpose humanoid robots, so that could also be on legs, might make sense in very dangerous places where they go instead of a human. So where they really represent a human, if they go down to a volcano or into a house with fire or fly to the Mars. I mean, there might be situations where these kind of robots are even really useful because they can represent us in that dangerous environment.
So Reina, I'm not a roboticist, so forgive me my ignorance, but I would think if you want, for instance, to assist a volcanologist, right, in their admittedly dangerous work, or go even further than they could, even with maximum protection, wouldn't you think, I mean, I can see how it would be an advantage to be legged, right? Because maybe this is a terrain where wheeled isn't getting you very far. I totally get this, but do you really think two-legged is the right approach there? I mean, wouldn't something like 4- or 6-legged be much better? And yes. Would it not be much better to be a little smaller and lighter in many of these environments so you can squeeze through cracks where a human would get hopelessly stuck, especially with bulky safety gear and stuff? I mean, aren't there arguments to be made that different body types might be better as well for these environments?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think this is one of the fascinating things about robotics, that you can come up with different incarnations of automated systems that help humans in various situations. So, but representing a human in an environment, I think, is one of the tasks that we should tackle here.
Mm-hmm. I see a question coming in from Rich that says, perhaps a better question is, why did previous humanoid robots fail? For example, the General Motors Robonaut. So, Francesco, I'm wondering, you referred to earlier industry approaches. So maybe you also had that in mind. Can you comment on that?
Yes, I can give a short, middle, or very, very large answer, okay, about this. So
how about we shoot for the middle, I think it's good to have a little bit of detail on this so that we can also maybe develop it a little further, right? So please go for the middle, and then we'll see whether we need more details, yeah?
The middle, and the reality is that it really depends on the different humanoids that we are speaking about. So, for example, in research, we have some good example about humanoids that are not failure. So it's something that they're going well, and they're going in the right direction, in my opinion. About the company that try to do these kind of things, most of the time, in my opinion, the bottleneck is the business plan. It means that they start using this kind of subject, let me say this way, in order to make marketing, create a booth, a wow effect. And then when the results that are very difficult to achieve, especially in humanoid-legged robots, didn't arrive, then there's someone that just stopped the project. And so in my opinion, the failure, it was about a probably too optimistic business plan in order to achieve what they wrote about, okay? And so they use more from marketing side, this kind of robots, than to a useful service robots. So this is one point. Then the other part that is from research, in my opinion, we have a very good example that robots are doing very well. And there are also some companies that are doing robots for that. And in my opinion, is not a real failure on that.
Yeah, I completely agree with Francesco here. I mean, you could also, I mean, it's also this question of the technology readiness level, right, where we are, right? So it is like, too optimistic business plan means that you're done with the developments mostly, right? So you're basically ready for the market, and you need to have an application, and both is not really there, right? So I mean, we might have like expressed interest in having a robot at home that helps us and maybe cleans up when we leave, or does breakfast for us or creates a breakfast for us, things like that. But all of these things is something that we did not reach from a technology readiness level, right? So we don't have a robot that we can buy in a store. It doesn't even need to be humanoid, right? It could be, if you think about a normal robot, right, whatsoever platform, right, on like wheels, one arm or so. If that system would be able to create breakfast for thousands of users, right, with all the diversity that we have there, I think then we would be at a readiness level that might be okay for these developments. And I think we are often, and I have the very same impression there with Elon Musk, like overestimating the readiness level of the technology. And at the same time, we also would need to have like the business plan in terms of applications. So that this platform, Elon Musk, he says 20K. Right? That's actually what he thinks this robot is going to cost. But if you buy a device for 20K, then it also needs to have like substantial applications at home, right? That where you say, okay, that's great. I'm going to pay 20K for this machine that helps me and creates a better life for me. And that's something I don't see.
Right. Reina, do you want to chime in on this? Do you disagree with anything that's been said?
No, I'm totally in line with our panelists here.
Good. So maybe then we treat this question as kind of answered, right? So I have actually a question that I've been dying to ask, but I will keep this back because there is another question from somebody watching us on YouTube, Radhika. Is the application in which we are looking for support more important, or the humanoid capabilities of the robots? So is this more driven by wanting to do certain things, or is what's really driving that sort of a desire to have a robot that's human-like? And maybe this pertains to efforts such as, you know, Tesla's. I guess we would need Elon to really have an authoritative answer, but we can probably speculate, right? I guess from what I'm hearing, you all seem to be pushing for, let's look at a real application that's worth it, you know, from an economic point of view and maybe from a societal point of view, and then develop capabilities that can deliver on this and are actually realistically achievable. So it strikes me that none of the three of you is really driven by the idea that it would be just curious and interesting to have something that's as human-like as possible. But maybe there are other people out there who are driven by that idea. What do you think?
And definitely that's okay. I mean, researchers have to strive for developing humanoid type robots to better understand humans. So, but I'm from the industry, I'm more task driven. And I think I would like to solve the problems at hand, and in a way that it's really creating value for the customers and for society. So that is something that pushes me forward.
Yeah, I think these are two different aspects, like the one that Reina mentioned, namely solving the problem and not being constrained by the form of the robot, right? So that would be step number one. And then we could say step number two is modifying the robot in a way that it is a humanoid, right? So, and that requires potentially way more than we need for the first part. For example, on the humanoid, you maybe want to have also skin, right? And skin, developing a proper skin it's its own research field, right? And like temperature, pressure, shearing, all these like sense of touch, this is super complicated. And getting this information from the skin into the computer or the brain, let's call it the brain, right? So with minimum number of wires, like wiring, weight, power on the machines, all these things are part of like motors, so are all parts of research still ongoing. And then doing all this in a resource constrained system, because like if you really think about humanoids, then it would be 70, 80, 90 kilograms, or let's say, you name it, right? And that also has impact onto the energy that you can have, the compute power that you have. So we actually need to scale all these things that we develop. And we might have a big compute center for our normal robot somewhere, but like if we take this idea of humanoid seriously, then that should be like a standalone system without a wire to a computer and run everything on board. And I think this is another challenge where we will have like multiple orders of magnitude to solve in various dimensions.
So if I can add something, it's about the kind of technology that we can use is one way to see this from perspective point of view, making and pushing the limits, not pushing the things. So getting out from the usual solution, even in industry or in the real world, at home, for example, is one point of view. So pushing the technology in order to do things in a different way, but in my opinion, has not to be completely different way to see also the application. So at the end of the day, if we will really want to have a robot that is working with us, we have to be keen in order to have a minimum viable product that could be achievable and also payable, and that it works in a robust way without having tons of engineers that has to use it in order to make it working. So this is something that the reality, the truth is there. So we need to arrive to a certain point that we will have a robot that could be able to do a simple task in a simple way and with from economical point of view, like Reina said, achievable. So this is the dream of everybody, and in my opinion, is a long path on that, but is not completely unachievable. And probably the short term could be the space, because we have to push the limits over there. But in my opinion, we could have also some solution in the future, also at home or in the society.
Thanks a lot, Francesco and Reina and Wolfram. I just have another question here from the audience, from Reinhard in this case. What is a minimal set of functionalities or capabilities to make a home robot economically viable? Or is it far from being realistic in your view? So who wants to respond to that first?
I think the question, I would like to discuss with Reinhard actually, because I think the question is maybe a little bit ill-posed. So what would be a value that you would want to have from a robot in your home? And here I'm really having difficulties. Whenever I'm asking this question to an audience, they say, okay, I want them to make the dishes. So to load and unload the dishwasher. I mean, these are tasks that you can think of immediately, but they have basically no value. I don't think that anyone would pay 20,000 euro for a robot that would be able to do that. Plus maybe a few other things. So what is the value that you are creating with such a robot in your home? You might come up with some dream requirements, but then is again the question, what is technically feasible? And then another question is, what is economically viable? So you have to answer these questions. And I think I have not yet seen any user study of things that people would like to have automated in their home, and then other people thinking about what is technically viable and what is technically feasible and economically viable.
I mean, one could imagine like this, like having a robot that solves the task of a cleaning service, right? Let's take this thing, right? And then let's assume you pay 20K for the robot and it works seamlessly for X years, right? If this is like the price for the robot divided by the number of years is below that what you would pay for the cleaning service, and if it has basically the very same performance, then maybe this is a business case for a robot, right? So the problem there is that cleaning is an extremely difficult task for robots because they are made out of computers and wires and motors, and those systems don't like water. So dealing with basically food or cleaning, you do not want to have your robot cleaning the bathroom and then without washing its manipulators doing your lunch. And these are things that is completely unsolved right now. We don't have any ideas how to do this. Of course, like the robot could use specific arms for the bathroom and specific arms for the kitchen. But still then, right, there might be certain types of food to think about, like the robot handling meat, and then one person is vegan. So, you would have different arms everywhere to actually cope with this problem and don't have contamination, right, between. So these are things that are extremely difficult to solve, and where probably the comparative advantage of a service team in your home is so much higher than that of a robot or even a humanoid robot, that it's going to be very, very difficult. So I think that although we all dream about this, like there are subtle problems there that make it extremely hard.
In industry, you are using tool changers, and even these tool changers are so expensive. But it would be good news for all gripper manufacturers or robot arm manufacturers if you have to exchange the arms or grippers many times for the different tasks at home.
I think anyway, based on realistic way, because in the question was also the word realistic. In order to be realistic, probably, in my opinion, we don't have to start thinking already a robot that will be, a Rossi at home. So someone that could do everything. Because, for example, one example is the vacuum cleaner, that we nowadays more or less all the family has. So we could probably have some specific task that makes sense. But at the moment, as far as I know, there's nobody that already find this kind of things that is economically achievable. And one of the functionality or capability that I think the robot has to have is from one side, the waterproof, like Wolfram said, because water usually is not good for robots. And this is from development point of view also a high cost, especially to make all the tests and certification that has to be done, and from the other side, also the fact that the robot has to work not only for 1 or 2 years. Probably we have to improve the robustness also of this platform in order to have a robot that has not to be changed every 2 years. Because if not, we will have the business case that Wolfram try to figure out will decrease, because yes, if you just change the timeline of robots, probably make no sense.
So I hear you all being pretty skeptical about a viable business case being made with realistic technology in the foreseeable future, right? And here's David saying, when Musk started Tesla, the TRL of electric car tech was too low for anyone else to invest. He was proved right. When he started SpaceX, no one thought he could achieve even launch. He did. In robotics, he's probably not making the mistake that software-based companies have made when trying to invest in robotics. He's a hardware guy. Why is he wrong now? Surely Musk's scale investment in AQuA would deliver a humanoid in 10 years. I love that question. So let's see what you guys think. So maybe we're going to start actually with Reina on this one. No, what do you say to David here?
David, actually, these are also thoughts that I had, but because I was not really commenting on Elon Musk before. I think that there is some reasoning in what you are saying, so he might prove right. And if I think about the large scale production of motors that you have in the automobile industry, definitely if you use these kind of motors, then they are really cheap. but they are also only specified for a couple of hours of operation. So a car life has at maximum 10,000 hours, not more, over 10 years. And you still have to bring it to the garage every now and then. But anyhow, the scaling factor of having these kind of motors, maybe in a humanoid form, that might work, that you have the hardware costs come down. But then still there's the technical feasibility of all the things that we have to do in our, or that we would like such a robot to do in our environment. And here I'm a little bit more skeptical, having seen the progress over the last 40 years. I have difficulties to see that the physical interaction, so bringing AI to the physical world, is something that will scale anytime soon.
So we are starting to get quite a few more questions. So what I'd say is, if Wolfram or Francesco want to add anything, especially if they feel differently about it, we definitely like to hear this. But rather than going into too much more depth on this one, perhaps we then move on to the next question. Please, Wolfram, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this question. This is pretty cool and very provocative, I must say. But I still think the situation is a little bit different here, because this is what these robots have to do, is basically solve that what we call, or achieve that what we call AI completeness, right? So it's the same thing as building a self-driving car, right? And we are not there, and even Elon Musk has not achieved a self-driving car. He has created an autopilot, but it is not a self-driving car. And there, it gets even more difficult, because this robot will have very, very unconstrained environments, which means that that there is no lane the robot can stay in for multiple miles and just go straight, right? And with maybe reacting to obstacles, right? You can go very, very far by just lane keeping. But a humanoid in a home, that is not lane keeping, that is complexity with every step. And that is where I think Elon Musk is underestimating the complexity.
Yeah, I'm tempted to say, Elon Musk might think, humanoid robots, that's not rocket science. And he's right. I don't think that's rocket science. It sounds to me like you guys are saying rocket science might be quite a bit easier, actually. And I could see this, right? Because in a sense, space is a harsh environment, but it also is, for the most part, unless you go on the surface of planets and things like this, right? Which Elon really hasn't done yet. And it's also a very predictable environment, right? It's driven by large scale physics, and sure, this is very challenging, and it's great that he's made that much progress there, much more progress than experts thought possible, but maybe indeed it is not really comparable to the challenges that are faced by these sort of more AI type systems, right? And I really like Wolfram's point there that Tesla sell well and they run pretty well, but they're not self-driving, and that was the real ambition. And I would also, I have long-standing bets with people, because that's the way I sort of kind of back up my real beliefs. I have long-standing bets with people that we still won't see this within the next 5 years, a fully autonomous car, not by Elon, not by anybody else. In any case, unless Francesco, you have an urgent comment, I'd like to move to the next question here. And that is from Na. In the social robot study field, to develop a social robot that is better able to understand people, behavior, speech, social distance, etc. For all those feature study, data collection is important. I would like to know in industry how to do data collection, or where the data comes from. Could you please give a brief introduction to that? So who would like to tackle this one?
I could say, data collection on the shop floor is something that is becoming more and more popular. But every sensor, every actor produces an awful amount of data, and this data can be collected nowadays. So there are protocols available that you can collect all the data, and you could even stream it into the cloud. But what is happening is that the most manufacturing companies, they don't want to have this kind of cloud access, because they have security issues with that. So they use a so-called, let's say, edge device or cloud on premise, their own private cloud, to collect this data. And then there's the big task to analyze the data and to make something out of it. And I think here's still a lot of room for improvement, what can be done with the data. But the collection itself, I would say, in the industry, on the shop floor, is something that we can do by now.
Great. Unless anybody else wants to, is super keen on chiming in. Francesco, please.
Yes, about data collection, I think that one way that robotics company, as far as I know, are doing are pilots. And then there are some databases that are available, but are very few. And then most of the company, like Reina already said, have a closed part of data. But data is one part of that. Then the development of the solution sometimes is not only based on data. So data is an important part, but it's not only this. In my opinion, we still have to work. And one of the things about the previous question that I didn't mention is that one of the important part also from investment point of view is that more and more in the last years, we are seeing a lot of company, a lot of startups that are working on software. And so hardware is one of the important point, is very extremely costly. And taking a wrong decision, sometimes it means that there's a big part of the budget of the company that just fall down. So it's very complicated. For this reason, from an investment point of view, it's not very appealing. Okay, but we need it in order to have better robots and better also our society. We need also to make investment in hardware. So this is, in my opinion, one of the points. And just to come back to your mention that you said that we are all pessimists. I'm very, very optimistic to have humanoids in real life, but probably not at home in the first instance. But we have seen a lot of good role of robots, for example, in hospitals and in another environment that could be also humanoids, even in the shop floor. So even in industry. So I'm not a pessimist at all.
Great, Francesco, because you're leading us right into another question from one of our viewers on YouTube. Radhika asks, apart from the service robotics, where else can we see the applications of humanoid robots or robots with human capabilities? And what I heard you say, the three of you, over the course of this very fascinating conversation is space exploration, dealing with dangerous situations like emergency services, or perhaps research in dangerous places, right? We heard shop floor quite a few times, and we now heard hospital. And when we talked about robots in the home and the business case of that, one thing that didn't come up at all was this idea of care for the elderly, right? We know that many people would rather stay at home than be in a facility where their living is assisted, and that staying at home often requires a caretaker the caregiver to be there, right? And that, of course, is something where people have also speculated a lot about the extent to which robots could fulfill these roles. So I'm curious, apart from these application areas that you've all mentioned, are there others that you can think of where humanoid robots or robots that can manipulate objects, live in environment or work in environments that are basically made for humans, where they could make a lot of sense, maybe business sense as well? It's already
Absolutely.
quite the range, right? So Francesco, do you have other examples that you are passionate about?
Absolutely. For example, elderly care, we already demonstrate even the business model in a European project that is all the deliverables are open source, where we decrease the amount of money that social security and government have to spend in order to use robots that could be teleoperated. So we demonstrate that, for example, having one robot in each home, teleoperating guys. So we still think that the human in the loop, especially for healthcare, could be the way to go at least in the first instance. So nowadays, it can control up to 10 robots remotely and give the first aids in case of needs. And so this will, we demonstrate the business case with numbers, and it was a lot of money that we can stop spending on that. But then there's bureaucracy in the middle, and then sometimes that slowness sometimes that we have in the procedure that it didn't take it. But I completely agree that this will happen, and soon, because we need it, and COVID demonstrated.
Mm-hmm. Wolfram, Reina, any other application areas that you think are really important, lucrative, valuable for society?
There might be more, but I think these are the major ones.
I think that we can also mention inspection and maintenance also. This could be also a way that is more or less the extremely risky environment, that hazardous environment that we mentioned before, but also for inspection sometimes could be important. And also in production, sometimes we have also a problem that for some big companies, sometimes they have to do some operation that humans nowadays are doing, and then will create some physical problem to the person that for the worker. And so in this case, also humanoids could help a lot. And the last thing that also recently we had a competition about it is about avatar. So having a robot like an avatar that you can control remotely. So probably at the moment we are only seeing the possibility of having meetings remotely with an avatar, but in my opinion, the potentiality of this technology can go beyond this kind of easy use case.
Yeah, that's a very interesting perspective. So I'd like to push you a little bit, at least you, Francesco, because you said it, on the maintenance robots and also the robots in dangerous environments, and for instance in the operating rooms in hospitals, because it seems to me that in all those cases, being human-like in any way, shape, or form might be trumped by being better adapted to the task, right? I mean, the famous pipe inspection use case, right, which I understand is economically important, of course, exactly doesn't want things about the size of humans, because it's much better to be able to crawl through smaller pipes, right? And whether you want to be legged or not in that environment is another question, right? Now, of course, I understand that your definition of humanoid is pretty broad, right? But one could argue that in all these cases, there are probably body types and capabilities that actually are very different, and in many cases go beyond humans. In the operating theater, for example, right? You certainly want surgical robots that don't suffer from the usual limitations that a human body would have, right? For instance, much better dexterity for brain operations would be a huge asset, right? And a humanoid body shape would be totally unimportant for that sort of thing, right? So wouldn't you think that these are all examples where actually being humanoid in a narrower sense, at least, where really the thing resembles a human even superficially, might be a disadvantage?
I think you should adapt the robot to the task. So whatever kind of problem you have, you should really think about how this can be best solved. And a humanoid arm might not even be the best solution, like you said, for a surgical robot. So these robots have to be maybe very slim, and they have to be able to do these minimally invasive surgery operations, and be very steady and not shake when the surgeon is doing something. So there's not one robot fits it all type humanoid. I really advocate for designing robots for purpose, and then also making them economically viable, as I said.
Great. We do have a couple more questions, but I have been holding one of my own back for a long time, and I can't resist from asking this to you, because I also think it fits well into the flow of the conversation. So many of you will know this relatively recent novel by Nobel Prize winning author Kazuo Ishiguro called Clara and the Sun. So this is a novel about a very particular application of humanoid robots, namely as companions for adolescents and children, right? And that is a case, Francesco, you alluded to this earlier, right? That one of the reasons why you want a robot perhaps to look like a human and act like a human is to make it easier to interact with humans, right? And of course especially with kids and adolescents, it might be pretty important to meet them where they're at, right? And create a little bit of a peer situation. And that is what Ishiguro explores in the novel. By the way, for anyone out there who doesn't know the novel, I would really recommend it if you're interested in humanoid robotics. I think this is a very cool thing to read. Of course, it's extremely speculative, but it raises many interesting aspects, including a few technical ones. Just one example: the robots in this novel, they don't get very old, right? They really wear out, and then they're discarded. And when they're discarded, that of course causes issues, because these are robots that are that are AI complete, and therefore have consciousness and all this sort of thing. So that creates a big can of worms, which I didn't want to go into. But robots for companionship, Francesco, what do you think of that as a use case? Because they are clearly being as human-like as possible, or maybe pet-like would be a big advantage, no?
Yeah. I'm not an expert on a companion, let me say in this way, but I've seen that is frozen the connectivity. I hope that you are listening.
No, we can hear you. It's good. We can hear you and see you.
Okay, thanks. About the companion, in my opinion, robotics could help a lot, especially with elderly. So the closest example that I have is with all the project and all the pilot that we did with elderly care, and in my opinion could be very, very useful, because nowadays most of the time the rhythm of the life and the actuality of modern life, it means that sometimes when we will become elderly, we will have less and less interaction with the real world. And so having a companion that could help us also can explain what are the new stuff, for example, what is AI, or what are the new trends. This is something that nowadays not all the elderly has the opportunity to have, and a companion could help in this task. And from the other hand, for example, with the example that I did before, we could have a easy connectivity with his familiar, or with an hospital, with a doctor. And so in my opinion, using a robot could really help. And not only in order to have a kind of pet, like you said before, but also have a kind of platform where you can also have different kind of connection. So in my opinion, it is something that will happen, and and this is the future.
I mean, I could add something to this. There's also another question about, like, that we spoke a lot about hardware, and that we left out the aspect of cognition. Right? If you really think about companions, then what you would need is like dialogue systems that are actually by an order of magnitude or multiple order of magnitudes better than that we are having right now. And it is not about like just having a conversation, right, which is a challenge on its own. I know that with nowadays technologies, there are amazing advantages in terms of like generating outputs or texts that in some sort are meaningful, given that what you said. But having a meaningful dialogue, like let's assume our dialogue here was meaningful, generated by a computer, like something like this is, we all know this is extremely difficult and very, very far away from nowadays technology. And if you take this over to robotics, that all of a sudden means that you also have this linkage to your physical embodiment, meaning that you can turn the dialogue into action and do meaningful things, right? So imagine things like instructing a robot, like how to solve a specific task, and generalizing this to the next day and knowing in advance like what that basically means. And maybe having a conversation about how to change the solution that he did in order to make you happy, right? And this type of understanding is something that we are extremely far away from. And at the same time, this is super important when it comes to building a robot that Elon Musk shows and having that robot in your home, right? In the end, this question that is completely unanswered is, so how do we actually instruct the robots to do meaningful things for us? And this is something that we are very, very far away from, right? Like in many cases, it is like imitation learning. It's basically learning the trajectory. That is what we can very, very well. But giving the robot an instruction and telling it like whatsoever, bake a cake, right? A cheesecake, right? And doing this in a meaningful way, right? So that is something that I mean, not in 5 years, let's put it that way.
Excellent. And thank you very much, Wolfram, for segueing actually very nicely into the last question that we'll be able to answer today. It's from Jon here. According to your opinions, physical aspects are difficult, but is AI-based cognition available? And I think, Wolfram, you just made the point that there is a huge challenge there as well, right? Now, of course, we could pretend that the dialogue that happened here between us, actually the discussion, was all in fact scripted by ChatGPT, right? And you know, maybe people nowadays would believe us. I think some people would believe that this is possible. But as somebody who's keeping an eye on all sorts of AI developments, I think we're still far away from that as well. However, you pointed out, and I think that's an extremely good point, that this job becomes even harder when you have to interact with the environment and have a connection there between the purely cognitive tasks and being convincing there, and then bridging that to the way you interact with the environment. Reina, Francesco, do you want to add anything to that, to the AI-based cognition aspects that would be required in order to deliver on Elon's vision and similar visions?
I'm waiting for that, but yes, I think that at the moment the most important part we already touched, but I have a great expectation on that. So I think that with AI we could probably improve a lot the use of the robots. Probably also changing our mind, because like engineers in robotics, we use models. And so we always want to have everything mathematically perfect. And so probably we could also change a little bit this kind of stuff, and we can improve also some use cases.
So you're optimistic there, but would you take a bet that in 10 years, Elon's robot would exist? Or let's make it easier for you. How about 20 years? Would you place a bet on that? The $20,000, human-bodied robot that is cognitively capable of, learning household tasks, having a conversation with, performing arbitrary jobs on the shop floor.
I think that it will arrive, and I hope that I will see it, and hopefully also build it.
Okay, cool. Reina, what do you think?
I like these questions about in 20 years, because I've often seen that answered in the wrong way. And I cannot predict anything here, because just looking back 20 years or even 30 years, what people predicted what would have happened in 20 years from then, this has all not been achieved in the real world. With mobile phones, etc., and every cool devices that we have, all predictions had been wrong in the wrong direction. But as soon as it goes to physical interaction with the environment, I think all the predictions proved wrong.
So that would mean that you are a little skeptical even on the 20-year horizon. You wouldn't bet a lot of money on it, right?
Not too much. Just from a simple prediction from the past. Maybe we are at this hockey stick where all this evolution accelerates significantly, and this will happen tomorrow, but I don't think so.
Well, usually I guess tomorrow we'll all be around to witness what will happen, right? And there are some people, including Elon Musk, who are willing to make a big bet on this, right? So I suppose it's good if some people make a big bet, because that will motivate them to push as hard as they can. So we'll see what happens. Our time is coming to an end. Thank you all very much for being here. First of all, to our three excellent panelists, Reina Bischoff, Wolfram Burgard, and Francesco Pharaoh. It's been a great pleasure to be a part of that and to hear your opinions and to maybe tease a few more things out of you than we're already known about what you know and what you think where this is going. So this is great. Thank you also very much to Alexa for the great work behind the scenes in making this possible. Thanks to euRobotics and to Clara for partnering up to deliver this. I hope everybody out there who has watched this and is about to watch this in the recorded form will enjoy it and will find it interesting. Maybe we'll dig it up again in 5 and 10 and 20 years and see how wrong or how right we've all been with our various opinions, predictions, and so on. So in 5 years, it's a deal then. Thank you all very much. Have a great rest of your Friday afternoon if you're here live with us. And otherwise, I hope you enjoyed the recording. AQuA events will be brought back by Clara and various partners. Who knows, maybe our friends at euRobotics also found that this is a fun thing to do and will start their own. That would certainly be great. And I look forward to seeing you all again at a future event. Thanks and have a good day.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.